So, you want to vacuum with your Hoover U648, whatever they call it, self-propelled. Well, here are some steps you might have to do first, which we'll discuss a little bit later. But let's talk about maintenance. Let's talk about what you have to do with this machine. So I think the first thing to note, we're going to move the camera a little bit, is you cannot pick it up by this handle because you will break it. Do not do that. You can pick it up here, but never pick it up by this handle. And I'll explain that. There's also a convenient handle back here to pick it up by. So, the reason you never pick it up by that handle is it's self-propelled. And you can break the self-propel mechanism, which I will now show you where that is and how to check for that. Excuse the sloppy camera work here. So, right here, we're going to just lift the camera up. Right here, there is a cable, and that moves the self-propel arm. And the self-propel arm, this plastic piece in here, can break if you pick it up. Also, the cable can come out of its place, come out of adjustment, or you can break the steel cable. So all those things can happen if you do that, so you never really want to do it. Now, here at this angle, this machine looks like it gets completely flat. That's only if you hold the pedal. Most people never get it past this place. So let's go on to some of the maintenance with this machine and talk about what we have to do before we get it up and running. Because this machine was left to me by the previous owners of this house, why there wasn't a central vacuum. I found out from the previous owner she didn't believe that they existed back then. So that's why there wasn't one put in. But the previous owners of the house had like 2 or 3 of these things scattered through the house, and they're inappropriate for my house. They are appropriate if you have carpet and some tile, but they're not appropriate if you have wood floor or marble or anything nice. Just not appropriate. So let's look at what condition it was left to me in right here. So I'm going to pop the cover, and this is how 90% of these machines I see come back, or I see them in, which is why I'm doing this video. So you can see the dust is here. And the dust is leaked all over the bag compartment. And yes, they were using a cheap paper bag, and that's definitely part of it. Get some gloves, because who wants to touch this? But the real reason there's so much dust is even if you go with a Hepa bag, there's no gasket around here. So because this was made, they basically chopped a Hoover A bag or a Hoover Z bag down to fit this. When they originally came out with this design, they borrowed the bag color from the Hoover Concept 1 or the late model Hoover convertibles, if you're familiar with those. So you see it just kind of puffs dust out the side of it. This is a half full bag. Now, this is a replacement bag. And this often you will see this Y/Z, and that is incorrect. The Y and Z bags are 2 completely different bags, but some generic manufacturers do that, you know, just to kind of save money. The thing I wanted to do with this, so there's the bag. That's what's in there, showing you that's in there correct. I'm going to run this first. I just want to hope I can capture on camera how much dust comes out of here when you run one of these. Of course, you would have to plug it in, which came unplugged when we did that. Alright, it's exhausted here and here. Now, I'm in a well-ventilated area. I've got an exhaust fan right over there, but you can't see it. So that's fine in here. But in your house, that is absolutely horrible and not acceptable. So I don't even need to get the particle counter out to show you the dust. If you can see the dust, that means it's above 5 microns. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to change it and get this thing cleaned up before we use it in the house. proper way to dispose of these bags. So the nice thing is if you do get an aftermarket bag, they'll have like a little piece of tape for self-sealing the bag. Though the Hoover genuine bags are absolutely good. Don't shy away from those at all. So it has a 1-layer exhaust filter. The earlier ones had 3 layers, and there was a Hepa option, though it's not a sealed system, so I kind of don't feel that it's necessary to do. Pull out this filter, and everybody forgets about this filter. These are really cheap. You can find these online. They're a 2-pack. Buy them, change them every 6 months to a year. Same with this. Every 6 months to a year, change it. If you want to buy the Hepas, do it. You just really have to keep an eye on it. So I just want to show that this looks the same. Now, recently I saw another YouTuber who does excellent videos just, state he liked the machine, and he did a very basic review. But long-term use of these machines, this is how they come in, this is what they will look like, no matter how vigilant you are, because again, it is leaking dust before it even gets in the bag, which we all know to be a problem, and that's why most manufacturers have shied away from that now, including Hoover. Some of the newer Hoover Y bags do have the gasket, but again, it's really not sealed leading up to there. There's other places it leaks in, and I'll show that throughout the video. The first place it does leak is through the headlight. You can see how foggy this headlight is. Let's just zoom in there, get you guys right there. You can see just how foggy that headlight is. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to take care of that. We're going to clean this up. There's 2 ways you can clean this up. You can bring this outside and blow it out with compressed air. That's a great way to start doing it. I personally don't want to get that dust everywhere right now. So what we're going to do, we're going to grab a central vac. We're just going to start vacuuming stuff out. Now that we have that vacuumed out, it still looks pretty bad. Even though this has a bag check indicator in here, not that it really ever worked that well. We're actually going to wash this separately. We're going to wash this piece separately. This pulls off, we're going to wash it separately. Then what we're going to do is we're going to take this outside, we're going to run the vacuum and allow it to blow itself out, and then with a combination of compressed air. Just sanitize the front of it. Now we're going to get to the bottom side. Put the adjustment down, we're going to see what's going on down below here, really in the guts of the unit. Right there. So we're going to, first thing we're going to do is we're going to take the 4 screws off there. Maybe bring the camera out just a little bit. And these 4 screws, you can use a drill if you want. Just make sure you don't over torque them when you put these back in. Now this is a newer unit, and if you couldn't tell by the model number or some of the color changes, the newer units, these were black, but the biggest change that they did was when TTI took over, they went to a CWP brush roller, which has sealed ball bearings. The old ones had open bearings, and that was really bad, and they had to be lubricated about every 6 months to a year before they would. Or you would change your brush roller every year. So it's up to you. So that's got to be cleaned off, obviously. But I want to talk about what's going down here, because this is kind of some of the faults of the machine right here. So one would think that you would just like have one rubber belt, or you would put a rubber belt and a rubber belt, or a non-stretch belt and a non-stretch belt. But they didn't. They used a V-belt right there. Then they used a stretch belt. You can see it's a genuine Hoover. Let me show you the difference between this after a few months of running it. I mean, you can just see how much this just shreds the belt, and it doesn't directly connect to the brush roller. It actually is just going from the brush roller to the self-propel. And they did this on a few vacuums where they had this edge strip pulley. They did it on the WindTunnel 2. They did it on a commercial machine, which name escapes me, the Conquest. That's it, the Conquest. So it's just something to think about. So the thing you need to really check is this little idler pulley. You see me pressing, I know it's black on black, but you see me pressing up and down it. We're going to get a screwdriver, I'm just going to point it out. Just make sure you guys see that on camera. So that guy right there, you need to rotate him on, and you need to look for cracks in the plastic. And I see no cracks in the plastic. This one is good. Now the reason you're looking for cracks is if this is cracked, it won't hold tension on this belt, and then the roller won't turn. So that's super important to check. The other thing is hair and stuff gets on the side of this guy. And again, later models, it was a sealed ball bearing. I have one of the open bearings left over from the Hoover days. So this was one of the transition machines between TTI and Maytag. So you must clean that out. The bearing actually needs to be lubricated on this one. The other thing that had open bearings was the transmission. The transmission itself occasionally would need to be greased if they were really loud. And it's really complicated to do, and it's not something I even recommend doing. I recommend just dealing with the noise, knowing that this machine is going to self-destruct at some point. So that's an unusual thing. Another thing, the wind tunnel feature of the machine. We see the word wind tunnel, we think of it as buzz marketing. But what the actual wind tunnel part of the machine was this extra suction channel diverted under the brush roller to bring suction to the front of the brush roller and create a vortex. At least that's the way it was explained to me from a Hoover rep. I actually don't think they clean any better. I think just having the round brush roller chamber is enough. But the wind tunnel part, this guy is perhaps one of the most sensitive and brittle pieces. I would always stock these in my vacuum shop. And, okay, that one's not broken. It is cracked right there, if you guys see the crack. But this guy will crack out and break. Nothing to do with you, it's not over-torqued, it's just the way this goes. Though I do recommend hand-torquing this part. But I like to take this part and wash it out because you can see all the stuff builds up. In fact, one of the flaws with this design and some of the older vacuums is they had all these spaces exposed, and you would just see all this stuff build up. Because the brush roller was beating and grooming the carpet, but it was also creating more dust than the machine could suck up. And this machine here has a side feed suction, which means the suction over here is not going to be anywhere near as good as it is over here. Even though they tried to compensate with this wind tunnel path design, it's still not the same. And if you put sand on the carpet and vacuum with this, you'll absolutely see it. So we're going to go ahead and clean this out. Of course, the best way to clean out any vacuum dust from a vacuum is with central vacuum. Take your crevice tool, put it right there. So now that that's all been cleaned out, we're going to wipe it down. But first, we're going to actually blow this out with compressed air over here. I want to get it really, really clean. So we're just going to do that. Again, you want to be in a well-ventilated area when you're servicing vacuums. Super important. Alright, so that's been cleaned out. Now you can see that there's hairs gathered around this pulley. Or if I tilt it, you can see the hair that's not actually supposed to be red. Pull that. Again, this vacuum came with my house. It wasn't actually something I went out and purchased. Alright. There's a lot of hair wrapped around there. Alright, next, I'm going to try and get this on camera the best I can. So that metal piece right here can scrape this pulley and chew it up. So I always just give him just a little settle back to his place, just like that with a screwdriver. Now that gap is good. And by hand, because this machine is old and brittle now, we're going to check the torque there. And he is good. We're going to check the torque on the silver screws with the machine. Alright. So it has been retorqued properly, again by hand. So now after you've done all this nonsense, now we can wipe it clean. And you can start to see the clear. I'll put the orange screwdriver under there maybe. You can see the cleanness. So that, get that nice and clean. And again, the reason I just do this is for sanitary purposes. I like to clean out all my brush roller compartments, especially on a vacuum that wasn't mine that I'm going to use in my house. A little bit later, just for fun, we're going to do a review on this. Alright. Again, this piece needs to be cleaned off as well. You can bring it to the sink, or it's not too bad, you can wipe it off with a rag. Alright. Now I have seen if this is broken, the customer doesn't want to replace it. I've seen vacuum shops glue this back into place. again, that's not proper if this is broken. It's time to change it. We're gonna just slide it in. There's actually like a little groove that it goes in right there. And this screw. Again, don't over torque it, hand torque this. And what's difficult is that the threading on this is pretty stiff. There you go, that's torqued. So now that's all clean, we can now address the belt issues. I'm going to show you how to check the brush roller and the belt and the idler pulley groove. So before you put this belt on, you have to put the thin belt on. And if it sits flush, like so, it might need to be replaced. Ideally, this should sit out and look something like that. So just a little bit should stick up. We're talking a millimeter. But if it's flush or if it's convex, the belt needs to be replaced, and or the groove has worn wide here and the brush needs to be replaced. So those are wear things, and the same goes for the pulley back here when you put the belt on there. I find that these belts and the brush rollers tend to wear at about the same time, so I recommend replacing those as a set. And I recommend replacing every 4 to 6 months this belt right here. Alright, let's put the belt on. A lot of new techs actually struggle with this. It almost should be a job interview question if you're going to be a vacuum technician. And you guys are going to say, oh, that belt's easy. Well, not for most people. And most people are not going to change their belt on their vacuum, believe it or not. But if you're one of those people, I'm going to make this look real easy. So, we've put that on. We've checked all those checks we talked about. And we're just going to walk it on. We're going to make sure, we're going to hold this with my thumb, just make sure this isn't slipping. I don't have any uneven grooves on this belt. And I see that this belt actually here was good, which is kind of rare. So next we're going to put this guy on. And you want to make sure the shaft here is clean. And if we shine in there with a flashlight, you'll see that it's clean. You can see that that's clean in there. So we're going to put it on that belt, then we're going to stretch it to this. But we're just going to have to walk it on, is going to be the method that we're going to use. So we're going to put this on just like this. Get on there, make sure it's on there. Then you're just going to basically walk it on with your thumbs. So I'm going to try and make this as simple as possible. So you're just going to walk this on. And now it's on. Simple as that. And if it's on, that's what it should look like. Next, these guys, again, these can vary in color, but these always come loose. And if you forget them, it's not really a huge deal, but it is because it leaks suction out the side and causes the machine to whistle. So we're going to put that on there. Make sure it's on there. Again, those face up. Those are supposed to be an attempt at edge cleaning. Of course, we know that didn't work. Next, when you put this on, it is very easy to break this guy. So we're going to zoom out and let you guys see. But that guy can break. But mine is good today. Alright. We're going to set this on a low torque setting today, because we do not wish to over torque these. And it's important to turn them reverse till you hear a click. And that's important when you're dealing with plastic. You want to, I'm going to do this by hand so you guys can hear, hopefully. Turn in reverse. That click, now you are lined up with the thread. And you want to make sure you do that either with the screw gun or by hand. There we go. Now, doesn't matter. We're going to put those 4 long screws in and torque them. Alright, so that's good to go. Next, I just want to, now that it's clean, you can see the self-propelled cable is properly in place. So that's good. And this is the carpet hardwood floor setting. Make sure it's in the carpet setting when you're changing the belts. Make your life a lot easier. So everything has been washed out. You can see there's still a little bit of dirt left, but it's much better than it was. It's been cleaned out. Just gonna go in the trash. And we're gonna put a new filter in here. As I said before, I don't think these filters ever last more than about 6 months or so. And just because of the amount of dirt this machine lets leaking through everywhere. Just to show you on the side, those don't really fit all that well. You can just see all the kind of loose cracks and stuff. It's not a Miele. We can't expect it to be something German. So we're going to set it down, and we're going to put a bag in it. Now this is controversial, but if there's not a bag dock, most customers have trouble putting their bags on. What they'll actually do is they'll put the bag, let's see if I can find something to represent my point here. We're going to use this. So instead of them putting the bag all the way over the collar, they'll actually just set it on top and then stuff will get loose, or they'll put one side on, not the other. And the way this works is there's two prongs in there that hold this on. So we're going to just put the bag on. It's important with these bags to just hold it out and only put it on with the collar so you don't rip the bag. It's on, like so. So, again, one of the harder things of this machine for a lot of customers was putting that bag on, because you have to put the machine down like this to do it. You can't do it in the upright position like you can on most vacuums. Put the cover back on. This carpet here is the middle setting. So I've changed it. I've got everything started up. Next, let's talk about the controls up at the top of the vacuum cleaner. So what we have up here is we have a self-propel on and off, and for bare floor you're supposed to turn the self-propel off. So now it's on, and when you move the handle up and down, which is why you can't grab it by the handle. And then if you wiggle it around, you can find a neutral position that switches it off. And then we have the on and off switch right there. Now this is actually flipping a switch down in here, so it's got a big rod and there's a lot of play in it. So let's see if I fixed everything and if everything's working right on this cleaner. Everything except for the light bulb is working. As you've noticed, I seem to get the vacuum cleaners with the broken light bulbs. That seems to be like a common theme throughout my YouTube channel. So that guy's good to go. So let's go ahead and actually dive in to the usability and house cleaning portion of this review. So in 1998, this was the Consumer Reports Best Buy. This machine was made in the US, and it was one of the best values out there. One of the best cleaning machines, and had more features than we knew what to do with, and was definitely a powerhouse of a machine. And for many years was considered a great budget vacuum, much the way the Miele U1 is considered one of the best upright vacuums today. this was that back in the day. So it's 2018. It's officially discontinued. I'm glad it lasted 2 decades. No vacuum should last 2 decades. After 10 years, it might be time for a redesign. That being said, there are some things like Kirby and Sebo that have continued to peddle their old designs. So now that Hoover was, has been sold to Maytag, and then they were sold to TTI, and this one is one of the first TTI ones where it has some of the major updates. And I'll explain some of these updates. One was it had a brush roller with sealed bearings, which I'll explain a little bit later. The other which is this empty capacity, empty, whatever you want to call this orifice in the vacuum, should have a turbo tool in it. Well, one of the things that TTI did with a lot of the vacuums on the Hoover line is they started giving them all turbo tools because it's one of the most used accessories, which meant that the plastic door that used to come open and break off a lot, but it kept the tools nicely in there, went away. And what we got was this. We have our tools arranged in the back. We have a crevice tool. We have a upholstery tool. And we have the most useless dusting brush. And I have to say, the genuine Hoover Maytag dusting brush was a lot better. You can see how short these bristles are. This appears to be borrowed from the WindTunnel T. And later they would equip this with the backpack vacuum, so they were just trying to standardize their attachments. So that's why this was done. But if you're going to use any sort of dusting brush on this vacuum, buy a third-party one. And that leads to the strange tool system. And I'm kneeling right now, so I can get this out. But I usually have to bend over to get this off, and that really bugs me. So the wands are a 2-piece. And they're quite short. And they're standard 1.25 inch, but they're not standard 1.25 inch. So the wands fit inside here, like so. And once the wand is fitted, the tool becomes standard 1.25 inch. So that means you can fit standard 1.25 inch tools on the end, you just can't put them on the end of the hose. That means all the accessories for this actually fit inside the hose, as well as on the end of the wand. So that again was quite strange. Your hose on this machine, it's about 5 or 6 foot stretch hose, and there were aftermarket, or accessories I should say, longer hoses from Hoover. Now the other thing about this machine is people always talking about attachments falling off vacuums. And I think this is one of those machines where they really do fall off. The crevice tool usually stays in place, but these upholstery tools, I can't tell you how many I've had on the bench, and they just, again, because this wasn't made for this, you can see that that's already come loose on there. So that definitely is a problem with this, so you have to just keep an eye on your tools. And they are eccentric in how they go on. You can't just put them on any way. You have to put them on the right way with that. Now there's a carrying handle here in the back. That's one of the most important features, because on this machine you can see the self-propel is controlled right here, and if you lift it from this section of the handle past this gap, you're putting stress on the self-propel. So you have to lift it either by this handle or by here. So that's something that's kind of quirky about this machine, and a lot of machines with self-propels, where you lift them is kind of important. One thing I think was an excellent design is it has a manual height adjustment, but it's kind of quirky. Instead of a knob or something, you have to lift it up, then you have to lift the power head up to move it. If you try to move it without lifting this, it can be hard. A lot of customers would tell me theirs is broken and they just didn't know how to use it. And it does get pretty high, so if you had some frigé, this might actually clean it. It works on my soft carpet on the medium setting, to give you an idea how dramatic those are. The other thing that was quirky was the carpet hard floor switch, which manually shuts off an idler pulley in this, and that, when you put in carpet floor, you don't really hear anything happening. But if you put the machine down like you're using it, you can't just switch. You have to stop, put the machine in the upright position, and switch it back to carpet. So that's a little bit different as well. Another thing we've seen kind of go away on a lot of uprights was the 2-position pedal release. And you'll see that this will lift up, and then that will go flat like so. Now while we're down here, let's talk about the bag situation, because that was always kind of a weird thing for a lot of customers. I know a lot of people will say, oh, the bag's easy to change. A lot of customers struggled with these bags over the years, so I'm going to kind of go through that once again. So the cover just pops off real easy. You have a bag check indicator. Now, I've only lived at high altitude locations the majority of my life, so I have never tested one of these at sea level. But at high altitude, the bag check indicator doesn't work. There's no adjustment. So I'm using a Hepa bag in here, and you can get Hepa bags for this cleaner. That's great, and that was one of those things that later Maytag, early TTI, they started including. And I recommend always run a Hepa bag with a machine if it's available. The only thing about running a Hepa bag with this machine is there's no gasket. So by design, there's no gasket on the bag, which means dust flows around the bag into the chamber, which is one of the reasons why these do need constant service. Another thing is you have to have the machine laying down when you put the bag on, otherwise it's damn near impossible to put on. So we're just going to put this on, like so. You have a pre-motor filter in here. Now, what's great about this is it says it has a Hepa filter. It's clearly labeled on there, and they're referring to the Hepa bag. They're really stretching that statement, because what came equipped in all of these, and this was actually a new one when we started, it's getting quite dirty, was just this pad on the side. So why some of them did get the Hepa filter on the side, those ones actually came with a paper bag. By the time they switched to the Hepa bag and this was made, there was no Hepa filter actually coming on the side. And Hoover even discontinued that Hepa filter for about 1.5 years before they decided that they would recontinue it. So that's really kind of a strange thing with this machine. Now, as showed earlier, I did give it a good service, but you can see that it's already getting dusty on the lens. This machine leaks dust. It does not pass the particle count test at all. So I don't recommend it if you have any sort of severe allergies. I think it barely is passable in terms of the dust that it has. But again, in 1998, particle laser counters weren't really a thing back then. They were like the size of a room or the size of a very large computer. So, you know, people weren't really testing vacuums like they do now. And we just didn't know. So that really wasn't a concern. The other thing about this machine that's really interesting is it has a dirt sensor. And Hoover has had a lot of dirt sensors through the years, and they've always kind of worked the same way. So we have a high and a regular setting, and what's supposed to happen is the light will turn green or red. Now, how does that work? Well, on a Panasonic or Recar or Simplicity, there'd be a sensor down here right towards the base of the machine that would, you know, as dirt passed through it, it would be break an IR beam or a laser or something like that. Not true with this. So, what the Hoover engineers came up with, and you'll see that there's just this little dimple right here. What that is a microphone. Yep. What happens is after the stuff already is about to go into the bag, the last step before it goes into the bag, this is actually attaches to the bag collar on the other side, is there's a microphone. So when stuff would go through it, it would turn that light. But by the time that happened, that was very far from down there. It was very far from the base. So it was ineffective in its execution. Maybe if you put a microphone on the carpet it would work, but a microphone that far up the dirt path, again, all the way up here, back, right here, pretty ineffective. But it was a feature it had. Now you have to excuse me, the light bulb is burned out on this machine and I haven't gotten around to changing it yet. The other thing that varies along these machines is the Hoover logo. This is a 3D Hoover logo. For a while they were a 2D Hoover logo. They were just like a decal on there. And then they were a paint for a while even. So the sticker seemed to be refurbished machines and the painted seems to be just like a time when they were going through some cost fixes and such. The other thing this machine has is it has the rubber wheels in the rear. Originally these just had hard plastic wheels, and these wheels do have a metal axle. Now this machine has the starts of the Hoover lean. You see that play there. And what happens basically is not only does this thing wear out, but the actual base wears out and breaks and starts to crack. So that will happen. Now this machine was not made to last 20 years. Though some of these are still around, these machines were meant to be kind of a quick 2 to 5 year life, and then you move on with your life. But with service, these machines do last a long time. Definitely they're going to last longer than a lot of the things like a Hoover WindTunnel T or something like that. It outcleans a Dyson. I would argue that it outcleans a Kirby. I know that will be controversial, and you guys are going to fire up the comments and have fun with that. Just remember, don't be an NPC. Kirby is best vacuum. Don't do that. So there's that. But I really like. Really, it's had a good run. It's done a lot of things, and it's really set the bar for what we expect with a vacuum. So some people are sad to see it go. I'm ready to move on. My first day on the bench fixing vacuums, I think I fixed 4 or 5 of these, all with the same sets of problems. So I'm ready to give it a good farewell. But I'm making this video because we should remember it. It was an important part of Hoover's history. So, with a Hepa media filter that says here that it traps everything, apparently, down to 0.003 microns. Now, only problem with this statement is that these shipped with Hepa bags. They didn't ship with the Hepa exhaust filter, and they're not a sealed unit. And, well, let's test it. So that's what's in the air. Let's put this to the exhaust of the machine. It exhausts in a few areas. We'll test all of them. I don't sound particularly good. So as you can see, this is not a HEPA filtering machine at all. And I've got the working vacuum gauge. So we're going to test this and see what it does. So we're going to put this on the end and give you guys an idea. Turn her on. So let's address the weight on this thing because it's not light. It's pretty darn heavy. It's maybe one of the heaviest vacuums I've tested next to a Kirby. I want to talk about the borrowed self-propelled unit of this vacuum. So in previous models, what would happen is a cable, kind of like a bicycle brake lever, would come down and actuate a metal arm, and eventually these metal arms would wear, but they took a long time to wear. That's what some of this black stuff is. Some of it's carbon dust. And then this would control the self-propel. Well, what they did on here was cheapen it. So we can see the cable coming down here, and then if we tilt this up, what the cable goes into is plastic. It's really hard to show, but you can see there's a metal clamp and then there's a plastic arm. And this plastic arm has a tendency to break, and this cable has a tendency to pop off on the other side of this metal piece, which is plastic. So this is kind of one instance where plastic on metal construction really was pretty bad, and it's pretty common to have to change this arm. Now, I say it was borrowed from an off-the-shelf, like Hoover parts bin, pretty much. Roll the vacuum over. And I want to show you. So really, the first time they came out with a self-propelled was the Dial-matic. But I want to show the Concept 1 transmission, which was made, oh gosh, good 10, 15 years before this was made in 1998 originally. And you can see, this is metal, this is plastic. Other than that, they share a lot of the same parts. If you take these things apart, the bearings, some of the gears, all that stuff is pretty interchangeable between them. And that really shows that the self-propelled thing was quite an old concept as well. And the other thing is, people often consider this vacuum to be the last good Hoover. This vacuum. Now people consider this to be the last good Hoover. So which was it? Comment below. I definitely have an opinion about that. I think Hoover kind of stopped being Hoover when they were stopped made in the US and they, Maytag bought them. Though I will say TTI has made several improvements. So one of the problems with the older Hoovers, even though this one over here had a metal brush roller, is that the bearings were open or exposed, which means there's no rubber seal on the bearing. Well, when the Chinese company TTI bought it, they immediately went to a CWP Technologies brush roller. Same company makes Kirby, Oric brush rollers. And what they did was they put sealed bearings. So we started seeing a lot longer brush roller life. These machines did not need to be serviced like the older machines. I used to tell customers if it had the open bearing type, every 3 to 6 months they need to be greased and serviced. And I'd still say that's true, especially in a dry climate. Now that might be slightly different in a wet climate, but dirt and grime still just gets in these bearings. So even though this has a metal brush roller with interchangeable bearings, which is a good brush roller, I think for all intents and purposes, the wooden brush roller with the sealed bearings is a much better brush roller. On to the park carpet pickup tests. So we've got our usual flour, our breakfast cereal. Again, we've added rice. And of course we've got some kitty litter. And I've got soft carpet, so I imagine I'll have to adjust it to the soft carpet. I'm going to try it on a medium setting, and then maybe go to a large. And we're going to see how the pickup test does. So let me just zoom in for you. Alright. Well, you can see that it left a lot of carpet lines. It kind of pushed the carpet down versus lifting it up. We can also see that it's snow plowed a little bit right there. So, and again, that's kind of the wind tunnel design, that it will do that. But we don't see really any signs that the brush roller was cleaning unevenly despite the side feed suction. So let's see if we can get the rest of that. So I think that did, a passing job in terms of what it's actually cleaning up, what we expect a vacuum should do. And that's the thing. This was always just kind of the vacuum that set the bar. Like, this is this amount of dollars, and we kind of started to expect, you know, if the vacuum's $200 or $300, this is what we were expecting it to do. And this does a lot of those things. You know, it cleans carpet decent. Is it perfect? No. In fact, I just felt, as I walked over here, I just felt a little bit of kitty litter. So it's not perfect, especially with the bigger objects. But with the fine stuff and pet hair, it works quite fine, quite well. Since I forgot to put the pet hair down, I want to just vacuum with this with pet hair so you can see that it does clean. So you can see it does clean the pet hair just fine. Not as quite well though on this side. There's still a little bit left. And it, as you'll hear me say over and over again, and this could be, you know, any vacuum without center feed suction, but that was an important feature that was explained to me a long time ago. Because the hose is only on one side of the cleaner, this side is just not going to clean as well. And the idea of the wind tunnel technology was to overcome that, and it definitely helped, but again, it's far simpler just to put the suction in the middle and make it work. Now you might be asking yourself, well, Hoover did that with other vacuums. Well, yes, they did. The reason that they did not do it with this was the self-propel. They wanted to reuse an old self-propel with the vacuum, so they had to move it off to the side. Also because of the multi-belt system. Can't be on that side, but they still wanted the vacuum to be able to go down low, which if you press the button here on the side, you'll see that it will lie pretty darn flat. Now you can also see that my camera is on here as well, if you're wondering where the point of view footage comes from. So that's kind of why it's off to one side. You know, if you put a big hose here, that would be too bulky. It wouldn't get under things. We're going to do a pickup test, and we're going to explain the self-propel on bare floor a little bit, because that's a kind of a real quirky thing. So, first thing you're supposed to do is we're going to switch to bare floor mode. You have to do it in the upright position. You can't do it in the normal position. So hard floor, lowest setting. That should all be good. Now, you also are supposed to turn the self-propel off. And I'm just going to push this before I turn it on and let you listen to it. And I'll show you the bottom side in just a second and why it's doing that. So we're going to turn it self-propelled. So that's why you're supposed to have the self-propelled off on almost any vacuum with self-propelled, if it is bare floor compatible. So let's do a pickup test, see how it does. And you can see what was left behind. Now the stuff over here, that's no big deal. That was actually out of the nozzle. But this stuff was clear in the path. And the reason it didn't pick that up, there's two major things going on that make this, in my opinion, in upright mode, not bare floor friendly. So, one thing that's major is it has side feed suction, which means the suction on this side of the cleaner, zoom out a little bit, is not the same as the suction on this side of the cleaner. Now the WindTunnel technology was supposed to help overcome this. Of course it didn't. And not a whole lot of air actually moves through here, unlike a Sebo X5 or something like that. The other thing is this does not make a very good seal bare floor. It just sits up, and basically, again, air is not going over there. There's no squeegee. And on the other side of the bare floors, even if you turn this off, that means you're manually pushing these heavy wheels, which can scuff. Now this is a newer model which has the rubber wheels, which helps. But no matter what, this, even though this has a height adjustment, it still has a floating head design. And this head is actually going to scrape on the floor. So not for use on wood floor. Though if you have rollout tile or tile, you could use it. But you'd probably be real harsh on this base plate here. So that's why I really don't recommend this machine if you're doing a lot of bare floors. And again, it's just sound. You can just hear, and the camera is about 5 feet away. You can just hear that it's not bare floor compatible. So how does the Hoover do on stairs? Well, as recommended in almost every video, is you want a canister or central vac or a hand vac for stairs. I don't recommend uprights for stairs. It is the wrong tool for the job. But if you just have a couple stairs, you might end up using it with this machine. So let's see how it does. Now, something to disclose, the hose is pretty, well, it's kind of medium length, but I consider it on the shorter side by today's standard. They did make a longer hose that you would twist on and off, but you couldn't store it on the cleaner effectively. Some people try and wrap it around, but it really just never worked. So if you have that longer hose, it might make this sort of thing a little bit more practical, and I'm sure those hose kits are out there somewhere. So I do not know what happened to the turbo tool with this poor vacuum. It never really worked all that well, but for demonstration today, we're going to use crevice tool. We're going to use the standard upholstery tool, and because I don't want to break my back, and again, attachments are really kind of awkward to get to down there, and they assemble like so. The other thing about the attachments of this vacuum is they'll fit in there, actually fit in the hose, even though they're standard 1¼ inch, and then they fit over, so the attachment is quite strange how that works. So we're going to get to vacuuming the stairs. Now, one thing that's important if you are using an upright on the stairs, you do not want to go top down. You want to keep the upright at the base of the stairs, keep it from falling down the stairs. And unlike the Kirby I tested, this, because the wheels are set back in there, this will actually balance on the stairs alright. And there's a stair carrying handle right here. So it is a lot more manageable than some of the other uprights I've tested. So without further ado, let's give it a try. Well, that actually isn't that bad compared to some of the uprights. I'll say this, the standard upholstery nozzle is pretty narrow. I'd say it's about even so much more narrow than a Miele one. And it's really aggressive. Let me put this back so it can flop around. So it's really aggressive when we look at this, because it's hard plastic. And what that has left on the stairs, we can see the grooming lines, which is okay. I'm not a problem with having those, but just to kind of give you an idea how it does on stairs, it's usable. I will definitely say it's usable, it's just not the best tool. Well, thanks for watching my Hoover U6485900, whichever model you want to call these, video. Give it a big thumbs up, and a big thank you to our Patreon supporters that help keep this channel running. If you're not familiar with Patreon, go click on the link below and go to our Vacuum of the Month program, and you can select what vacuum we're going to vacuum with for a month. If you have any other questions concerning this particular Hoover, definitely comment below. And as always, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell, because you have to do it twice now because you do.